It's getting kind of late, but I do want to cover one more topic, and that is uh, science and narcissism. Okay? Now, in my opinion, narcissists can't do science. And there's various reasons for that. And it took me a while to figure it out. Okay? Now, why do I even concern myself with this? Well, uh, in the process of trying to answer questions, all right, I had to adjust, take an adjustment in my hobby and start researching things like science itself and try to figure out or try to see what science was telling us about things. And what science tells us is that we can learn from our mistakes, and we have to test things, and if it's not testable, or if you can't make a mistake with it, if it's not really useful for science, okay, we have to be able to test it. It has to be falsifiable. It's usually wrong, and we have to make it better, okay? But that doesn't fully answer a lot of the questions that I was getting. You have to go a little bit further into why people would make a point in a certain way. For example, why the arrowhead was made in a certain way. There's cultural influences, so therefore I had to get into philosophy. Okay, there are certain philosophical studies that study human behavior and culture and that kind of thing. Now, philosophy gets into a vast realm of different topics, okay? To try to answer the question of why someone would make a stone point in a certain way, you've got to research and wade through like a sea of junk, basically, to get to where you might find something relevant in philosophy to address that question. But there is stuff there. There is stuff there that can tell you or give you insights as to why people make a point in a certain way. One of them is called anti-pattern. Okay, some people will continue, or some people will develop a not so good strategy to make something, but they'll stick with it anyway. Okay, it's called an anti-pattern. It's a dumb way of doing stuff, but they stick with it because that's what they know how to do. Okay, and there are other things too. Now, there's the aspect of psychology as well. If I couldn't get the answers every time, or I didn't feel satisfied with the answers strictly with a scientific approach, and I couldn't really find exactly what I was looking for, especially when I see extremely intelligent people making very stupid statements, why that was the case, or very skillful flintnappers in the past making very simple like hafts. Why is it the point itself is amazingly beautiful, but the way they haft it is so roughshod sometimes that it doesn't make sense. Maybe I should get into psychology. Why do people do things like this? So I studied psychology too, and then I got into studying why intelligent people make such stupid mistakes or stupid comments, and it has to do with narcissism and type B personality and certain mental disorders. Okay, so I never really thought I would get into that sort of realm, but it really does give you some insights as to why certain things are happening. And now it has helped me answer questions better. So in future videos, I'm going to be discussing things not only touching on the science and the philosophy of it, but also in the mental health aspect of it. And I see a trend, maybe not a trend, but I see a lot of junk involved in research that is junk because it has a mental illness tilt to it. Where, for example, I said a narcissist can't do science. Well, the reason is narcissism has various aspects to it. One aspect is the false self, or believing in fantasy about yourself. You could have an idea that this item was made a certain way, and because you are grandiose or you are very set that you know what's going on, that you will assert that particular reasoning that was made that way. And it could be correct, or it could be very foolish. And many times it's very foolish. But you're not going to take criticism. I could criticize you if you've got a very set view on how something was made, and if I criticize you, you don't take it as a scientific criticism. You take it as a hit on your identity, or a hit on your reasoning or your intelligence. Okay, if you have a narcissistic type of mentality, and that's not what I was intending at all, or that's not what people are intending at all when they criticize. Okay, as far as science goes, now there's a whole realm of criticism that's involved with politics. It's totally different. I'm talking about science itself. If you're the type of person who cannot take criticism, and you feel like it's a hit on your identity, or a hit on your life, or a hit on your intelligence, or something that is deeply personal, you can't really do what's necessary to improve your hypotheses. And I see this, unfortunately, in some very talented people. Okay? So, and it happened in the past as well. Now, how does that affect people in the past? Okay? That's a difficult question to answer, but I think it's part of why we see maybe points made in certain ways, okay? And why we see points that seem to be vanity items, or items that are only made for decoration because it makes you feel important, to have something a very finely made. Okay, it's vanity. It's part of. It may be part of narcissism. It may be part of something else. But there is a psychological aspect there. Another reason why narcissists can't do science is because of magical thinking. Now, I guess you can look it up. It's much easier than for me to explain it. But magical thinking, basically, you're of the opinion that you can cause things to happen just by thinking about it or believing in it. Okay? And let's say, as an example, ancient societies would use armor and shields and stuff like that, right? But they would also paint symbols on their shields, as an example. Now, why would they paint symbols on their shields? Well, I think a lot of it was magical thinking, that certain images and certain representations on your shield actually protected you from the enemy. That's magical thinking. What protects you actually is the material itself. It's not the symbology that you put on it and that sort of thing, okay? And I think the same goes for arrows. And as an example, the little lightning marks or grooves on arrows, there's a group that thinks that that's purely technical, and there's some just a flight characteristic aspect or a bloodletting aspect of those marks on the arrow, but I'm of the opinion that those are decorations caused by the belief that they will make the arrow better, or magical thinking. Okay, so that will answer some questions, and the same goes for the shapes or styles of the actual arrowheads or little darts or little dart points or knives and such. Okay. Another aspect, and how does that relate to science? And why doesn't, because it relates to science because if you tell someone that you think it's magical thinking, then you shouldn't concentrate either on that aspect, or you've discovered an answer to why it is. Some people will just think that you're picking on them or picking on the people in the past and say, no, the people in the past are not like that, or they'll take it as an insult because you're making fun of them in a way. Okay, but it's not. It's just an analysis, okay, of human beings and how they really are. Okay, it's not poking fun or making an insult. Okay, and that sort of thing. Another thing is, narcissistic people need to control things. They need to control narratives. They need to control data. They need to control results and conversations and have input where they feel that they're in control of the situation. And that can interfere with research. That can interfere with testing. That can interfere with new people coming into the field and working on things that they don't think are valuable or political at the time. Okay, so the control aspect is something that interferes with the science as well, and I see that also as a trend. There is an increasing trend toward the control of where science is going, the directions that science is going in, especially when it comes to writing research. Writing research these days, I'm seeing like 99% of it, you are trying to support your hypothesis with something. And you don't pay attention to the criticisms. You mount support onto the arguments that you have. And that has to do also with narcissism and your need for reinforcement or validation for yourself. Okay, it carries over into the research where the research needs to be supported, it needs to be authoritative, just like you are as a narcissist, and important, not to be criticized, and to get other things to feed your opinion and get verification, validation for your opinion. That's not how science is supposed to work. All right, all these papers that I see that have this supporting that idea, this supports that idea, this supports that idea, that's wrong. I mean, it's okay to start that way with your initial hypothesis, but to develop your hypothesis, it has to be developed through criticism. You have to have exposure to other areas, like, for example, other areas of science, to get a full picture of what you're doing. Take criticism and say, well, okay, yeah, well, for instance, the shoes with the fur on the outside, I think that the fur helps grip the ice and snow. Well, if you look at another discipline, if you look at skis, making of skis, and you see that they're putting fur on the bottom of the ski for making it extremely slippery, you got to accept the idea that you're wrong on that. Well, no, because I have support that, well, these shoes are found on an ice patch, for instance, so it has to be used for ice, right? There couldn't be any other explanation. It has to be gripping the ice really well. And I'm going to pursue support for that idea. Okay? That's not how science works. Okay, that's pseudoscience, and I think I mentioned that in another video too. So there's that. And I could get further into it. There's more aspects of narcissism that affect science, but those I think are the biggest ones. You know, and I don't want to offend anybody, but it's probably inevitable, and I've had to adjust my thinking. I've read many books now on philosophy, history, psychology, okay, and I'm getting to the point where I understand which arguments I should be listening to and which are not. And most of the stuff coming out these days is just extremely frustrating, because they do not take criticism. They say they have peer reviews, but that's just the echo chamber review, in my view, in many cases. I have seen some very critical peer reviews, but the papers that finally come out are, you know, minor corrections. I haven't looked into it as deeply as I should, but the ones that I see coming out that say they're peer reviewed, who reviewed them? Because there's obvious conflicts and contradictions, for one, in logic, and number two, with other fields that you know have experience and they don't match. And number three, they go on tour or they have discussions or lectures promoting their ideas, where they should be accepting criticism for the ideas. They should be reading the criticisms, not promoting their hypotheses and their work in that way. You know what I mean? They should be sitting down looking to see how to improve their work and how to issue revisions and how to issue new hypotheses, and constantly involved with a process of cleansing the hypothesis and rebuilding, discarding what's wrong, instead of looking for validation, more support, more proof for their hypotheses, and that sort of thing. There's an old expression that says science dies. Science advances with the death of old scientists. Okay, I think that's kind of true, but that's the reason. The reason is narcissistic behavior on the part of many so-called scientists. Okay, I've already ranted for like 18 minutes, so I'm going to call it quits on there, but call it quits on that. But I did want to touch on that topic because I've been spending a lot of time lately. In case you're wondering, you know, why it's taking me a long time to do a lot of reviews of material, is because I'm studying psychology now. I'm studying philosophy and integrating that into the questions that I try to answer. Okay.